Hello, profilers!
It's time for our weekly rendezvous.
This is the podcast where we share true stories of French crimes.
So, today, what is the story?
Today's case is about an affluent French family who seem perfectly normal up until the moment somebody very important goes missing. This is the case of the disappearing jogger.
Enjoy the story.
Friday, October 27th, 2017.
The story takes place in the small town of Gray, in the French region of Haute-Saône. Isabelle and Jean-Pierre Fouillot decide to organize a raclette party for the family. Stephanie and Alexia, their two daughters, as well as their respective husbands, Gregory and Jonathan, come together to eat this traditional French meal. It's an ordinary evening. Everyone is happy and everything is going well. Alexia and Jonathan return home around 11 p.m. The next morning, Saturday, October 28th, at around 9:30 a.m., Alexia gets ready for her jog, as she normally does. Before leaving, the young woman sends a message to her sister, Stephanie.
Hey, I'm off for a run, and I'll come and see you afterwards if I can. Kisses. Around 11 a.m., 2 hours after leaving for a run, Alexia still hadn't returned home. Her husband, very worried, told his in-laws that he couldn't find his wife. He looked for her, retraced her route, but nothing. According to him, it's not like her to leave for so long. About 3 hours after her departure, Jonathan, still very worried, decided to act and went to the Gray National Police Station to report the disappearance of his wife, 29-year-old Alexia Daval. He explains that she had gone out for a run that morning, without money or her telephone. But this is out of the ordinary for her. Jonathan declares that Alexia has no reason to disappear, which makes him terribly worried. The police take the statement very seriously, especially as there have been several murders in France in recent months, notably of female joggers. According to her family and husband, Alexia has no reason to disappear. She's an account manager in a bank, a bubbly, energetic, cheery woman with plans to have children. She's close to her husband, and above all, to her parents. There is nothing to suggest that Alexia wanted to flee or end her life. The police therefore rule out suicide.
With the help of her husband, the police retrace Alexia's steps. He tells them about the previous evening's raclette party, which went off without a hitch. Alexia played a lot with her nephew, Stephanie and Gregory's son. At around 11 p.m., they left his in-laws' house, went home, watched a bit of TV, and went to bed. The next morning, they woke up at 8:30 a.m., and Alexia went for a jog. The police asked Jonathan if she was angry when she left, if they had had a fight. Did anyone want to hurt her? Has anyone threatened her? He would answer no to all these questions. With her husband's description, the public prosecutor calls for witnesses. She was wearing bright pink running shoes, a red jacket, black shorts. She wears red glasses. She has medium-length, dirty blonde hair.
From that moment on, the search for Alexia began, and major resources are deployed. Many people in the town of Gray are on the lookout for the young girl. Her mother, Isabelle Fouillot, is a town councilwoman, while her father, Jean-Pierre, owns a PMU, a local betting shop where people come to bet on horses. Alexia's family appealed to the kidnappers through Isabelle. If he had an ounce of humanity, he'd think Alexia has a life. She has a job. She has friends, colleagues. She has her family. We're all waiting for her. I'd like him to give her back to us. Despite all the means deployed, Alexia is nowhere to be found.
2 days after her disappearance, the police would make a terrible discovery. A body was discovered in the forest, very well hidden and quite far from the place described by her husband, since it was some 10 kilometers away. The body is covered in a partially burnt white sheet, lying on its back and also partially burned. Wearing shorts, pink running shoes and glasses, the corpse could well be Alexia. The forensic police were hard at work on the crime scene. But what intrigues the investigators is the position of the body, as if she were resting in peace, as if she were respected. The murderer tried to make the partially burnt body disappear. These are the initial findings of the forensic police. They also noted a tire track not far from the body and a white plastic cap placed under the corpse.
However, with this new discovery, the first problem in this investigation arises. A journalist learns that Alexia's body has potentially been found and threatens to spread the news. This means that the suspect or suspects will be informed via the media that the body has been found, preventing the investigators from doing their job properly, since this would affect the police's ability to wiretap and analyze the behavior of possible suspects. The prosecutor asks the journalists for an extension while he breaks the news to Alexia's family. He summons her parents and husband to tell them the terrible news. The body found is indeed that of Alexia Duval.
According to the initial investigation, the murderer could well be from Gray or the surrounding area, as the murderer had to know the area well to leave the body where it was found. Remember that Gray is a small town of just 5,000 inhabitants. The residents are worried. Everyone is very, very afraid. The people of Gray lay thousands of roses in front of Alexia's father's betting bar. There's a sense of solidarity among the residents. 3 days after the discovery of Alexia's body, her parents and husband appear before journalists for the first time. Emotions running high, it's Isabelle who takes the floor.
We'd like to thank everyone who has rallied to support us. That's why we've decided to pay tribute to Alexia by organizing a solidarity march that will take place this Sunday, November 5th, with dignity and respect. A week after Alexia's death, a jog was organized in Gray, led by her husband Jonathan. The following day, several solidarity marches were organized all over the rest of France. It was during this period that the debate on violence against women was rekindled and became more and more frequent in the country. Alexia became a symbol for the fight against assault on women throughout France. A huge crowd turned out to support Alexia's family at this solidarity march organized in Gray, with some 10,000 people present, twice the population of Gray. Alexia's parents and her husband led the procession, hand in hand. This tragedy has only strengthened the bond between them. During the day, Jonathan breaks down several times, his face ravaged with tears. He then addresses the entire crowd from a podium, using a microphone. It's the first time he's spoken in public. His voice and hands trembling, and his breathing difficult. Barely able to stand, his father-in-law accompanies him to the microphone, holding him by the arm.
Alexia loved swimming and running, a passion that brought us together, both in the effort and in the growth of our relationship. She was my first supporter, my oxygen, the force that pushed me to surpass myself in my physical challenges. I'll miss this fulfillment terribly. We drew from each other's gazes, our exchanges, the energy we needed to go further together. A few days later, at Alexia's funeral, Jean-Pierre Fouillot was very close to his son-in-law, holding his hand like a man would hold his son's hand, protecting him and taking him in his arms. He declares during the ceremony, "I wish every girl would meet a man like Jonathan, and that all women would have a son-in-law like him." He had clearly been adopted by Alexia's family. Isabelle and Jean-Pierre Fouillot even went as far to declare, "He is like our own son." During this period, Jonathan didn't return home to live with his mother. He moved into his in-laws' house. When the first autopsy report arrives, it becomes crucial to the investigation. We learn that Alexia had been beaten and strangled, but that there was no trace of sexual violence. And for the police, this report closed a lot of doors, in particular sexual predators. The murderer could well be someone close to Alexia.
The police then considered it a crime of passion. What if Alexia was leading a double life? By questioning Alexia's friends and family, the investigators made a discovery that sent them to a new lead. A neighbor of the young couple had taken a lot of interest in Alexia, even going as far as harassing her for several weeks already. She refused his advances. The neighbor was interviewed by the police, but the lead was quickly closed, as he had a very strong alibi. The investigation slowed down. It wasn't moving forward. The list of potential suspects dwindled, and the police didn't have enough proof to find the killer. On January 28, 2018, 3 months after Alexia's murder, a new twist in this case that no one expected emerges. Jonathan Duval is taken in for questioning by the police, and the couple's home is searched. The French public are stunned. No one understands what's going on. No one can even imagine that he's involved in this story. Despite Jonathan's arrest, Alexia's family gives him their full support, totally convinced of his innocence. Once again, Jonathan Duval's lawyers don't believe in their client's guilt either.
However, over the last 3 months. Investigators have been gathering evidence to accuse the husband. No one was aware of the investigators' progress in this case. Not the family, not the journalists, not the lawyers, no one. From the beginning, the police had doubts about Jonathan's innocence, particularly during the initial hearings.
The young man had cooperated, as he told them about the difficulties he had encountered in his relationship. Alexia was taking hormone treatments as she was unable to have children. He also talked about his personal problems, such as erectile dysfunction and other intimate details. According to his statement, Alexia had violent outbursts, abusing and bullying him. But one thing struck the investigators at the time. They saw marks on Jonathan's body, traces that may confirm his statement that he was a beaten man, but may also show that there had been a struggle with Alexia. But why did the investigators have real doubts about this famous husband? Remember that Jonathan was questioned twice by the police, and in both statements, they found discrepancies. The first discrepancy concerned his schedule. He declared that he had run several times along the same route as his wife. During the reconstruction, the police realized that the times the husband had given did not correspond. As further evidence, a neighbor of the Duval couple explained to the police that at 1:26 a.m., he had been awakened by a noise he knew well, since it was the sound of a metal plate in front of the house, and whenever the car passes over it, the plate moves and makes a sound. The neighbor added that he stood at the window and saw Jonathan's SUV pull into the garage, and at that moment he thought, "Look, they're coming home at 1:26 a.m.?" Yet Jonathan declared to the police,
"We had dinner at my in-laws' house. We came back home between 11:30 and midnight, and we didn't go back out after. Not Alexia, nor me."
except that his in-laws' house was only 10 kilometers from their house. They should have arrived home around midnight or 10 past. This version doesn't match the one the neighbor told the police. Another witness then comes forward, confirming the officer's suspicions, Jonathan Duval's boss. Jonathan is an IT specialist and owns a white company van fitted with a tracking device. The tracker revealed that the vehicle was in use around 1 a.m. Jonathan Duval is lying. The police don't directly accuse the young man, but try to understand, affirm, or confirm what he says. Just as the evidence was mounting against Jonathan, French profilers were also casting doubt on his innocence. They pointed out that the corpse had been carefully placed in the forest. Alexia is wearing her glasses, her hands are in her pockets, and she is covered with a sheet. According to the experts, this is a gesture of making amends, a way of saying, "Forgive me." The experts establish a connection between the victim and her assailant because, as they always say, an assailant who didn't know his victim wouldn't take the time to care for her after death. Several autopsy reports arrive, and they too reveal things that go against Jonathan Duval. The autopsy revealed no point of impact, and an X-ray of the body confirmed that she had not been hit by a car. The body shows hematomas, blows to the face and back, and upturned fingernails. Everything suggests that she had fought with her assailant. The coroner notes that she died by manual strangulation. He discovered several small burns on the front of the body, from the feet to the head, as if someone had tried several times to start a fire unsuccessfully. He declares that there was no sexual assault, further affirming the theory that she knew her attacker. According to the profilers, when you attack someone's face, you're dealing with emotions, rage, and anger. The police then focused on the victim's husband, Jonathan, who day after day was overwhelmed by further evidence against him. They decided to tap Jonathan's phone.
In another surprising detail, Jonathan's speech, the one he gave a few days before the Solidarity March, is analyzed. A few people are puzzled by this speech, notably when he quotes, "She was my oxygen," knowing that Alexia had been asphyxiated. Was this a clumsy mistake? Or did Jonathan mention this word on purpose?
From that moment on, the journalists, along with the police and a few local residents, began to have doubts about whether Jonathan himself had orchestrated the whole thing. According to Jonathan's lawyers, he is extremely sad when he learns that certain people have doubts about him. He withdraws, trying to protect himself. According to others, these doubts are absurd, as Jonathan is an introverted man, almost obsessively shy, the opposite of a would-be murderer. Jonathan's lawyers would speak to the press to say, "Stop the rumors. Mr. Duval is a victim," and they believe in his total innocence in this case. They will also be supported by Alexia's family, who do not understand the unfounded rumors surrounding Jonathan. Alexia had an assertive character, unlike him, who was very shy when they first met. He was 21, and she only 17. But Jonathan's behavior changed over the years. According to his mother, Jonathan was happy to have found Alexia. He introduced them quickly, and they made a beautiful couple. Jonathan was also very much loved by Alexia's parents. As her mother declared, Alexia accepted him. He was part of the family. The father also declares, "We loved the kid like our own son. We gave him everything. He's our kid." After 10 years of living together, Jonathan and Alexia married. The couple is described by many as harmonious, passionate, and beautiful. But some people would refute this sentiment and express that recently things haven't been quite right between them. Most notably of those is Alexia's confidant, who has received several text messages in recent months. "He annoys me. He's a hopeless case who doesn't understand anything about women, about me."
Despite having a beautiful house, a beautiful wedding, she was sad. She was still missing a greater happiness, a child. But Jonathan didn't desire her all the time, as this text sent by Alexia to her confidant proves.
"When I try to be affectionate, he pushes me away because he doesn't want to make love."
In various text messages, Alexia criticizes Jonathan for his lack of virility, telling him he wasn't a man. He had erectile dysfunction and had seen a doctor to try and solve the problem, because Alexia often blamed him for the fact that she couldn't get pregnant, and she became furious.
Alexia knows she's hard on her husband, but she does it to wake him up, to shake him up, but he doesn't get involved. He even refuses to talk about the problem with her. He avoids the subject completely. And she berates him, saying, "As usual, when things aren't going well, instead of fixing things, proving your love for me, you run away." For several months, Jonathan had been taking refuge at his mother's, in secret. At the end of the day, he'd spent his time at his mother's house, only returning home after 11 p.m., when his wife was already asleep.
His mother questioned him, asking why he came over so often and why he stayed out so late. He was vague on the subject, saying he came home when Alexia was asleep to avoid crises. His mother then asked him, "But what kind of crisis?" He replied, "Don't worry about it."
The investigators looked further into the famous hysterical fits that Jonathan told them about. During the first hearing, the investigators asked if he had any marks of the violence Alexia had inflicted on him. He replied, "I have a bite mark on my right arm from yesterday morning because she had a fit." But no witness, doctor, or family confirmed that Alexia had hysterical fits. Two new elements of the investigation are about to come to light. The work van's tracker betrayed Jonathan Duval twice. First, the tracker indicated that the vehicle was in the woods where Alexia's body was found. And second, the tire tracks found at the crime scene match Jonathan's vehicle. All these factors point to Jonathan Duval's involvement in his wife's murder. A few days later, a new autopsy analysis was submitted to investigators. The expert found salad in the victim's stomach, not yet digested. This corresponds to the last meal at her parents' home on Friday evening. This means that Alexia was killed on Friday and not on Saturday morning, as Jonathan claimed, since he told the police that Alexia had disappeared on Saturday morning.
Remember the text message Alexia sent to her sister on Saturday morning? The investigators then compared the writing of the text messages and realized that there was an inconsistency.
Alexia wrote all her text messages in abbreviated form. However, this one is written correctly, and Jonathan, in his phone, always sends carefully written text messages. Once again, new evidence comes down against him. After 3 months of investigation, the judge finally decided to arrest Jonathan. But why did he wait so long? Quite simply, because the police had created Jonathan's psychological profile. He's a liar and a manipulator. The judge and the police wanted a case that would stand up without a confession. So they waited until they had all the evidence they needed to arrest Jonathan Duval and place him in police custody. The police visit the Fouillot family and inform them that they are going to arrest Jonathan Duval for the murder of their daughter. The parents don't believe a word of it. For them, it's impossible. They explain to the police that this must be a mistake. Jonathan's 2 lawyers are present with him. Before taking Jonathan to the station, the police search the house, and once again, new evidence comes to light. They find an aerosol bottle without the cap, the same cap that was found under Alexia Duval's body, but also similar sheets with the same pattern as the one that covered the victim's body. To be sure, the police presented Alexia's parents with the sheet from which the corpse had been covered, and Isabel replied, "Yes, I recognize this sheet. It belongs to my daughter and my son-in-law. For the experts, there is no doubt. Jonathan Duval killed his wife, Alexia. The interrogation was meticulously prepared several days in advance to be as effective as possible, and all eyes in France were on the sudden arrest of Jonathan Duval. Even before the first examination began, the lawyers discovered from a magazine, Le Point, that the police already had 3 items of evidence against Jonathan. They know nothing about the case and have not been told about it. The testimony of the neighbor, the tracker, and the tire tracks of his vehicle at the scene of the crime. The lawyers question the reliability of these 3 pieces of incriminating evidence. Jonathan faces 2 officers, still claiming his innocence. The interview is closely followed by behaviorists and the commander of the research section, placed in a different room, but who witnessed the whole scene. The first hearing goes smoothly, with the police asking Jonathan to tell them about Friday evening, how their couple works, and details like this. After a 3-hour break, Jonathan is questioned a second time, but this time, the officers change their tone and go further, confronting him with his lies and exposing the evidence. They try to get Jonathan to confess. His lawyers watch helplessly as Jonathan has no answers to certain questions. And as one of his lawyers says, if he doesn't have an answer, it must be him. But Jonathan continues to deny the facts. He keeps his head down, not looking anyone in the eye. You can tell he's just a boy on the run, avoiding everything, just as Alexia had described him.
After several hours, the police change their strategy and attempt to create a bond of empathy with him. Even though they don't believe it, in front of Jonathan, they insist on the fact that Alexia wasn't easy to live with, that she often demeaned him, and after enduring that kind of treatment for a while, it's understandable that he would snap, but the plan still didn't work.
The police change tactics again. They focus on the lawyers of the accused. It's a unique case, as generally lawyers and police rarely work together. But this time, Jonathan's lawyers seem to cooperate with the police. They allow his lawyers to have a private interview with Jonathan in order to push their client to confess. But once again, Jonathan totally denies the facts. He declares, "All the evidence is against me, and I have no explanation to give." The clock is ticking. There isn't much time left to keep him in police custody. The warrant officer attempts a 5th and final hearing. This time, his lawyers go a little further and explain to him that now he has no other choice. He has to be honest and tell the whole truth. Jonathan leaves the interview room with his lawyers and heads towards the interrogation room. He sits down in front of the officers in absolute silence. Tears start to fall. The officer then asks him if he has something to say. This time it works. Jonathan regrets his act, and it is indeed him who killed Alexia Duval. He explains that they started to fight in the car, then the fight continued into the house, still over the same thing. Alexia was dead set on having a baby.
She became more and more violent that evening. She insults her husband, puts him down. She even bites his arm and slaps him multiple times. This time, it was too much for Jonathan. He snapped and totally lost it. He started hitting her with multiple punches and strangled her, simply to silence her.
Jonathan DeVal's lawyer, Randall Schwerdorfer, announces to the press himself the arrest of his client. He declares, "We won't defend a murderer. We won't defend an assassin. We will be defending a young man who, in a relationship crisis, accidentally caused the death of his wife." Jonathan's mother, as well as the parents of Alexia, cannot believe it. They are in shock. They all believe in his innocence. During the lawyer's statement, a journalist asks the following question: "How does Jonathan explain his act?" The lawyer replies, "He explains it's because he had a very tense relationship as a couple. Alexia had an overbearing personality. He felt completely crushed, belittled, and at one point, there was just one word too many, one hysterical crisis too many, that he didn't know how to handle it, and went too far." This latest statement came as a bombshell. First, to Alexia's parents, where her mother declared, "I can't stand these words. There is a murderer, and it's my daughter's fault that she went looking for what she got. The lawyer was sullying Alexia's memory, and that's just not possible. From that day on, I said to myself, if he goes down that road, I'll be there." She was ready to fight for her daughter's reputation. And she wasn't the only one. Feminist associations also denounced his remarks as scandalous, as did the French Secretary of State for the Legality of Men and Women, who describes his comments as scandalous and dangerous. He's talking about murder, but rejects the term accidental. But just 3 months later, there would be a new twist in the case. Jonathan DeVal, who had confessed to the murder of his wife, or that he had accidentally suffocated her, went back on his word. He tells the judge that he didn't tell the truth. The real story? His new version is that he wanted to protect his in-laws. He retells the story of that famous Friday evening. It was the second birthday of the son of Stephanie and Gregory, Alexia's sister and brother-in-law. He says that Alexia had argued with her sister, and Stephanie's husband, Gregory, went upstairs to try and calm things down. A fight broke out, and it was him who strangled Alexia. Jonathan adds, "With the help of my father-in-law, to avoid a scandal, we both went into the woods to get rid of Alexia's body." He concludes by saying that he wanted to respect the family secret, and that he didn't want Gregory, being a young father, to go to prison, which is why he invented this story. This new version of a possible family murder divides the French population. On the one hand, there are the pro-Devals, and on the other, those against. The judge asks investigators to explore this lead, Jonathan's version. The Fouillot family is in shock. They can't believe that Jonathan has just announced this story. They feel betrayed by their very own, the son-in-law they so loved and protected.
Some people see Jonathan as a fragile, sensitive boy and can't imagine how he could have killed his wife. The Fouillot family, along with their daughter Stephanie and son-in-law Gregory, also decided to fight and not to let such accusations get out to the press.
The plaintiff's lawyer asks the examining magistrate to bring together the Fouillot family and Jonathan Daval. This request was granted, and on December 7th, 2018, Jonathan faced, in turn, the 4 people who accused him. Confrontations between Stephanie, Gregory, and Jean-Pierre, the father, lead to nothing. Jonathan stands by his accusations. It's finally Alexia's mother, Isabel's turn to enter the room. An important fact to note: as she walks in, she looks at Jonathan and says hello. Jonathan looks at his lawyers and asks them if he can answer her. With their agreement, he replies, hello. Of the 4 people, Isabel is the only one to say hello to Jonathan. The magistrate authorizes a conversation between them, and Isabel is allowed to speak directly to Jonathan, a rare occurrence at that time. She began the conversation, looking him in the eye. Jonathan, I'm ready to forgive you, but you have to tell us the truth. At the same time, Isabel pulls out a photo she'd brought with her of the couple's cat named Happy. She tells him that the cat is fine and talks to him about Alexia. He starts to cry a lot, overwhelmed by the photo. Alexia's mother adds, before ending the conversation, I can't take it anymore. We've got to get through this. You understand, your accusations about my family. It's hard. Help us. We're counting on you.
Jonathan breaks down completely, gets down on his knees, and tells her, it was me. I'm unforgivable. I'm the one who killed Alexia.
Isabel stands up, raising him up with her, taking him in her arms, and they both sob for several long minutes. Everyone looks on in silence. Everyone is overwhelmed by the emotional intensity of the scene. This time, Jonathan confessed to everything and is now blaming no one but himself. In June 2019, the judge decides to reconstruct the crime scene, and Jonathan is temporarily released from prison to go through the actions. Jonathan notably explains certain details. According to him, that evening, Alexia insisted that they have sex. But he didn't want to. He was looking for a way out and prefers to go for a walk. So he took the car keys, but his wife, as usual, shouted and caught up with him. She didn't want him to leave. She wanted to talk, but she didn't understand her husband's flighty reactions. She's been taking heavy medication to get pregnant, and she didn't feel her husband was invested. Alexia got angry, and the tone raised between the two. Some reproaches would be made. You don't assume your role as a husband. I'm fed up. You're not a man. Seeing as he didn't want to hear it, he headed for the car. Alexia tried her best to take the car keys away from him. She scratched him and bit him on the arm. At this point, Jonathan exploded into violence. He hit his wife extremely hard across the face and repeatedly slammed her head against the wall.
He explains that he just wanted her to shut up, to stop saying things like that about him, and for that, he strangles her for around 5 minutes. For Alexia's mother, there is no doubt in her mind. Jonathan's intention was to kill her, because, according to her, he could have stopped himself at any time before killing her.
Alexia fell down the staircase, and when Jonathan approached her, he slapped her twice to wake her up. But he realizes she isn't just unconscious. She's dead. At that moment, he thought of suicide, but he didn't have enough courage to follow through. So he then sought to escape his responsibility and decided to carry the body to the trunk of his car. He comes up with an imaginative scenario to escape justice, the famous story of the missing jogger. At the moment of her death, Alexia was already wearing her jogging attire. He only added her running shoes. The next part of the reconstruction takes place in the woods where the body of Alexia had been discovered. The investigators wanted to verify that there was no other suspect and that Jonathan was capable of dragging the body on his own. He grabbed her by her feet, pulled her out of the car, and dragged her to the spot where the body had been found. So they abandoned the hypothesis that he had an accomplice. He did, in fact, act alone, but he would completely deny the facts concerning the cremation of the body. He explained that he didn't want to confess to something he didn't do. Alexia's parents, who are present at the reconstruction, beg him one last time to tell the truth. They just want to understand. They fall to their knees in front of him, but Jonathan denies it again. The examining magistrate decides to close out the reconstruction. But before this, she authorizes a short interview, exceptionally, between Jonathan and his lawyers. One of his lawyers recounts the conversation.
I think I'm stuck.
Said Jonathan.
I don't think I can do this. It's me, but I can't. I can't say it. I'm in denial. I can't accept what I have done because it's not like me at all. And yet, it is me.
His lawyers explained to him to take a little time and to tell the truth. A few minutes later, he stands up and confesses to the rest of what he had done. He had burned the body by spraying it with expanding foam. This aerosol can was later found in his garage. On November 16th, 2020, Jonathan Duval's trial opens. This story has captivated the French public so much. The courthouse is packed with journalists. All of France has their eyes glued to this case. The plaintiffs attached the theory that this was a spontaneous crime. And if Jonathan had premeditated his act, Alexia's brother-in-law, Gregory, an engineer, studied the case file and revealed that the experts had discovered traces of anxiety medication and sleeping pills in Alexia's hair follicles. For Alexia's family, taking this medication was incompatible with her plans to have a baby. They think that Jonathan wanted to subdue her, to be at peace, that he was probably fed up hearing her talk about her desire to have children. Another point is brought up during the trial, still by the lawyers of Alexia's family. Sperm was taken off her shorts, opening up the theory that she was raped after death. Jonathan's lawyers are present during the trial and are stunned by what they hear. The coroner spent a whole day on the stand, and there was nothing to allow him to confirm that she had been drugged or poisoned, or even that she had been raped. According to the public prosecutor, who did not retain these elements, there was not enough evidence to take them into account.
At the end of the third day, Jonathan is interrogated on the stand. The public can sense a fragile man, weak and tired from these 3 intense days.
When he stands up, he staggers, his face pale white, and ends up fainting in the room. Once the trial resumes, the focus is on his motive. The investigation found no trace of violence between the couple. So why would an ordinary man, sensitive and loved as Jonathan was, go through with such a horrible act? Do we all have this capacity within us? Do we each have a criminal aspect inside us? The French public following this case are numerous. They are asking these questions, and they want answers. Can an ordinary and normal person truly kill? Interest turns to his childhood. But he wasn't an unhappy kid. In fact, it was a happy, pampered childhood until his father died when he was 13. He never said anything, but from that day onward, he started having tics and other OCD-related problems. The expert psychiatrist establishes a link between this obsession and the act. According to him, people with OCD may tend to internalize violence and repress it. He explains that Jonathan Duval, at some point, may have completely lost his footing in the face of a situation or words he could no longer accept. For example, the phrase, "You're not a man." He might have accepted hearing it 20 times, but the 21st time, it was just one too many. It was like a pressure cooker that finally exploded. On the last day of the hearing, the lawyer asks the jury for life imprisonment. Jonathan Duval's lawyer addresses the jury one last time, explaining that this is the maximum sentence reserved for the most dangerous men and women who have done their worst to society. In his opinion, Jonathan Duval cannot be judged in the same way as a serial killer. He doesn't deserve such a harsh sentencing.
The accused rises for these last words. Jonathan looks at Alexia's family, holding his hand over his heart, and says, "Sorry, sorry."
After 2.5 hours of deliberation, the verdict comes down. Jonathan Duval is condemned to 25 years in prison. He accepts his sentence and won't make an appeal. Alexia's parents had the murderer's name removed from her tombstone. Alexia now rests in peace under her maiden name. Isabel, Alexia's mother, declares to the journalists, "It is exactly what I had hoped for. It's the height of our suffering, and now we have come to the end of the fight. Now we will try to rebuild our lives, to turn the page and move on."
Thank you for watching our video.
We are excited to share these stories with you and to give a voice to the victims worldwide.
If you enjoyed this story,
you can help us out by liking the video, subscribing to our channel, and punching the notification bell.
very important, don't forget to give us your opinions in the comments.
Thank you again, and we'll see you next time. Au revoir!
Au revoir!